Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money.
In recent years, I've found myself growing weary of a lot of different tropes, not because they're bad, but simply because they've become so ubiquitous in the last few years that it becomes stale. Redemption arcs, Freudian excuses for villainy, a fandom habit of favoring hostility and romance over emotional support, will they, won't they, abuse apologia. Although that one will never not be rancid, but I digress. But there's another I've only ever briefly touched on, mystery mongering. It's less of a trope itself and more of a collection of tropes that are often handled in a very heavy-handed way that emphasizes their own importance more than anything else. It's time I talked about it. Unfortunately, because the trope is so widespread, I won't be able to cover everything, so I'm going to keep it to a few examples that have particularly irked me over the years. Just a primer for any of your usual, what about my personal favorite show questions. Okay, so old writing tropes like the Chekhov's gun and foreshadowing are as established as dirt, and I'm in no way suggesting that they're bad tropes in and of themselves. We talk a lot about overuse of a trope a lot, but this time I'm speaking explicitly about how a trope is often used. These days, mysteries are jam-packed into absolutely everything imaginable to the point that creating theories and mapping out the clues is, in many cases, just as much a part of the viewing experience as flat-out enjoying the story. And that's never been my jam. I'm not one to make fan theories. Occasionally I'll make guesses, sure, but nothing beyond a blanket statement said in the moment to see if I was right. But crafting these big, elaborate fan theories has never really been my jam. I've met people who theory craft and put more time and effort into headcanons than the actual material, and I don't particularly like them. They tend to become upset and even outraged when their theories aren't confirmed, and they get so attached to the show they imagined in their head that nothing could possibly satisfy. If you've noticed, it sounds more like I'm tired of hype mongering, then you'd be right. The current model of storytelling is very much focused on using the theory crafting nature of hardcore fans as a way to get people addicted. I've mentioned this in small doses before, and it's the real crux of the issue. I know quite a few people who actually stopped enjoying, say, Steven Universe only a few seasons in, but kept watching for no other reason than, well, I've invested this much time and I want closure. The sunk cost fallacy is everywhere these days, and creators can very easily exploit that. Think about how much the sunk cost fallacy is a core part of predatory video game monetization. Well, it's in here too. Shows designed to tease you in perpetuity with tiny hints and small bits of information, core elements of a series being saved for teasing social media posts and interviews to be sure you devote as much of your time to something as possible. Hell, it's the only reason shows have become increasingly serialized. Not because it's better than episodic storytelling, but because it's easier to drip feed information to the viewer. Episodic shows need to have a satisfying conclusion on every episode, and feeling satisfied is the exact opposite of forming a dependency. It's worth pointing out that addiction isn't just about drugs and chemical dependency. You can become addicted to anything that gives your brain stimulation, and when that stimulation is doled out in tiny amounts, it becomes easy to train the brain to crave something. To use Steven Universe as an example, and yes, by the way, I am aware of how often I use it as an example, once the show finally ended, nobody gave a shit anymore. The only people watching were those that just wanted closure for their time investment. Everyone else probably left when black characters were villainized, other shows started doing LGBT rep better than it, when the space Nazis started being sucked off with reckless abandon. There was a breaking point for everyone who wasn't slavishly devoted to the show. The way in which this was achieved was through constant drip feeding of information and throwing out random tiny hints to goad people into combing over every possible scrap of footage looking for anything. Gravity Falls was a similar example of that, and went as far as to include decoding ciphers. Now, Gravity Falls I give slack to because that ultimately was a mystery show and billed itself that way from the very start. People ultimately knew what they were getting into early on, and solving the mystery alongside the show wasn't necessarily part of the show, but it was something fun you could get involved in. Sort of like how game shows will include a brief span of time between answers to questions so that people watching at home can make a guess and immediately see if they were right. It's fun. It's a good way to do this sort of stuff. But if you weren't into the theory crafting and the mystery solving, you could just watch the show and still pretty much enjoy yourself. That was something you could do with Gravity Falls. Steven Universe, you couldn't do that. If you weren't into theory crafting and combing over looking for every little foreshadowy detail, Yeah, you weren't gonna have fun here. But in regards to Gravity Falls, people are already running wild by assuming that the Owl House, a different show made by a different person, is also doing the same thing for no other reason than because Alex Hirsch is on the staff. But because the Owl House isn't doing that, people don't have a consistent thread to follow along and are instead making wild guesses. The pinnacle of this, and what I would consider to be Exhibit A in why obsessing over fan theories is self-destructive, is during the last episode of the first season where a single-masked individual was shown. People tried to guess who it was, and one person in particular made the guess that it was Amity. The problem is that earlier in the episode, you see Amity at home with a broken leg. And this is not something that is difficult to miss. Okay, but that's fan theories and addiction peddling. Where does this become a writing problem? Well, it's very simple. You know how M. Night Shyamalan is notorious for his twist endings? Yeah, the fact that he is notorious for it is proof that he's bad at it. Plot twists are not supposed to be predictable. You're not supposed to be able to tell they're coming exclusively based on the director's name. The Sixth Sense is still considered to be his best twist ending. You know what it also was? It was his first. One of the biggest problems with mysteries is that they're supposed to be organic and fun. The more time you spend hyping up a mystery instead of delivering on it, the less enjoyable it is. Artificially dragged out mysteries are never fun unless you're the world's most boring person. This has been the problem with World of Warcraft in recent years. The story, while generally not being all that great outside of the sheer spectacle and a few really good characters, was always rather fun and straightforward. But starting around Legion, this trend shifted from straightforward, almost cartoon-like stories to these unbearably dense and twisty plot lines that always seem to be moving from one shocking reveal to the next. But it wasn't much of a bother because during Legion at least, it all had to do with the cosmology. See, for the most part, World of Warcraft had two separate running tracks at all times. The cosmology, which was always this weird world-buildy where does everything come from crap, and the characters and their personal stories. So you could play Legion to uncover the origins and secrets of the Burning Legion, or you could just kill demons while Khadgar cracks jokes. All of the Legion zones carry this along. In Azuna, you get to learn more about ley lines, or you could just save Grandpa Dragon. In Val'Sharah, you can learn more about the Emerald Dream, or you can pal around with Tyrande to save her useless ass of a husband. In High Mountain, you can learn more about Deathwing and the destruction he wrought, or just pal around with Mela and Ebonhorn and learn what it means to be a chieftain. And in Stormheim, you can learn more about Vrykul culture and the history of the Titans. Or you could pal around with the fun characters, help Sylvanas acquire more tall, muscular women for her harem, and kick Greymane's nose in. It's a great time, it's fun for everyone. Then BFA hit, and it was like, I hope you're not attached to any of these characters, because we're about to ruin all of them. I've criticized BFA for how it's handled Sylvanas' character, but in truth, no character got out of this unscathed. But that's a conversation for another time. We're talking specifically about Sylvanas here, because she's related to the subject at hand. You see, the most infuriating aspect about Sylvanas' character in Battle for Azeroth is that we just have no idea what the fuck she's even doing. Everything she does is shrouded in mystery, and there's never been a clear-cut answer, only cryptic bullshit. Hell, on the Shadowlands beta, most of the content with Sylvanas was just not in the fucking game, and that turned out to be prophetic, as presently the only times you see her in the live game are in a single in-game cutscene and another full-on cutscene later on after the ending is completed. All of the story's been tested over and over again, but Sylvanas? Nothing. There's nothing there. This is the main fucking character of the expansion, the most popular character in WoW, and there's nothing. Blizzard is doing the same thing of just not letting people know what's going on and only giving out cryptic nonsense. And for a while, I wanted to sit Steve Denuser down, slap him across the face with a steel rod a few times, and scream, what the fuck is she doing? Because it's been 3 fucking years of this bullshit. 3 years where we're all confused as to why the fuck this character has seemingly gone completely off the rails. We ask for an explanation and we get nothing. We were promised an explanation, but what we got was ultimately very little. Sylvanas wants to destroy the Shadowlands so we have control over our fate. So finally we circle back a little bit to what her character was pre-villain batting, but it's ultimately breadcrumbs because Sylvanas actually cuts herself off before anything can get personal.
Then the afterlife decides what eternity we must endure. We can't even choose who we...
She talks about the afterlife, about the cosmology. We get the cosmology, but we don't get the characters. And this is the problem, because the characters are what made Warcraft worth enjoying. It's almost like they know they fucked up. They know people are angry and upset about how this very popular character has been completely butchered, and they've seen people rightfully calling them out for what is the latest in a long line of Blizzard portraying women who suffer abuse and traumatic events as evil, and women in positions of power as evil, and they don't know what to do about it. But they don't want to stop writing evil Sylvanas, because the WoW team's pride has always always been its worst downfall, so they just opted to continue stringing people along because they know it's going to piss people off. And if they don't let people test it and hide it behind a veil of, ooh, no spoilers, then they don't have to justify allowing it to stay. Or maybe they really are just mystery mongering, in which case, welcome to patient zero on why mystery mongering is fucking bad. Because I can promise you, Stevie boy, the actual reveal of Sylvanas' motivations and why she's in her situation and what her relationship to the jailer will ultimately become is not going to be satisfying. People are not going to come out of that going, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that. They're going to come out of that going, oh fucking finally, now we can put that garbage behind us.
I am so tired of your games.
Now, that line I just gave, I wrote that before the cinematic came out. And then it came out, and I was right. The only people who like this cinematic are lesbians who are thirsty for the Banshee Queen. And yeah, I'm one of those lesbians thirsty for the Banshee Queen, but I'm at work right now. And the point I'm trying laboriously to get to is that I don't care anymore. Sylvanas is a huge comfort character for me, a character I've always been strangely attached to, and I just don't care. We've gone without an explanation for so fucking long that me and Michaela have gone and written hundreds and hundreds of pages of Sylvanas having friends and emotional support jocks, and I just like that better because it's actually content I can enjoy. I don't care. I don't care what the next breadcrumb will be. I don't care what the next teaser's going to be. Just do something. Shit or get off the pot. Now let's find some way to haphazardly circle this back to something the rest of my audience would care about, because at the end of the day, this is predominantly a general media channel and not a WoW channel. And I can't really be a WoW channel because you have to be a boring, creepy white man who has issues with women, have big dad energy, be a literal predator, or just have an absurd amount of patience, which my ADHD bitch ass is incapable of. But this is a problem throughout the entertainment industry. Sylvanas is not the only recent high-profile example of mystery mongering where story threads are stretched out far longer than they need to be for the sake of feeding addiction. I've talked about addiction-based storytelling for a long time and in this very video, and mystery mongering is the prime method by which it's achieved. This has its origins in the mystery box, a twee little nickname J.J. Abrams once gave to his creative process when it came to filmmaking, the general gist of it being audiences like to be surprised. The problem is that if you've watched a J.J. Abrams film recently, they're not that good, and the reason they tend not to be very good is because they're brought down by some big mystery, and they don't do very well unless they're attached to a big brand name. But audiences like to be surprised, we all know that. We all like surprises. But the thing is, we only like good surprises. A surprise party is neat, but a surprise subpoena? Not so much. The thing about twists is that part of the reason they work is because you don't see them coming, and they recontextualize the entire story. Once you know the twist, you go back and watch it a second time and get a completely different experience because you notice all the little things you didn't realize were hinting at it. This is why The Sixth Sense works. It's why Frozen works. It's why Empire Strikes Back works. It's why Knights of the Old Republic works. The reason these twists often don't work is because the creator is often so fucking pleased with themselves that they'll set it up as a mystery. This isn't a neat little story detail you weren't expecting, it's something the story is actively teasing you with constantly. In The Last Jedi, there was ultimately the reveal that the parents Rey was waiting for were never coming back because they sold her for beer money and never thought about her again. That she was ultimately abandoned by people who cared nothing for her. It's a powerful moment when Rey accepts that and reveals that she probably knew this the entire time and was just in denial. But there's a reason a lot of people were so unhappy about it. See, the I am your father twist was something that never came up in most of the original Star Wars trilogy. Luke's father is mentioned a little bit at the start of A New Hope, and then is never mentioned again until the big reveal moment. And even then, it's not brought up until Obi-Wan reveals that he's been in denial about his friend's turn to the dark side, and has invented a fantasy of Vader being a different personality entirely to avoid accepting that. It's a little story detail that turns into grave information for another character and reveals more about the personality of a different character entirely. It's a very enriching moment. Rey goes through a lot of the same motions, except she's playing double duty as the Luke and Obi-Wan, as the person who realizes they were abandoned and the person who knew all along and didn't want to accept that. There's just one little problem. A New Hope mentions Luke's father a grand total of twice, while The Force Awakens simply cannot stop harping on about Rey's parents. It never shuts the fuck up about them. It has this whole LSD-induced hallucination of absolutely random bullshit that also comes back to Rey's parents. Every single line of Rey's dialogue carries the undertone of, "This will mean something in Episode 8. There's so much weight and drama put onto Rey's parents parents that you would expect a revelation to suit it, but ultimately it doesn't. The actual reveal of Rey's parents being nobody works here, but I can't blame anyone who felt it was unsatisfying after the last movie spent so much time hyping it up. Subverting the audience's expectations doesn't work if you were the one who artificially set those expectations in the first place. Is the actual reveal good? Yes. Is it criminally unsatisfying? Also yes. This circles back to that age-old problem. Absolutes do not work in storytelling. No one trope is ever going to be the best in every situation. Audiences like surprises, but they don't like all surprises all the time. Mysteries and surprising aspects work the best when you're not supposed to be expecting them. Mystery stories can be fun because you're trying to solve a mystery, but a shocking twist only works when you're not expecting one. The best kind of surprises are the ones that make sense in hindsight. And sure, some people will tell you this is objectively better all the time simply because sometimes it can be done well, just like with serialized storytelling, grimdark melodrama, and enemies to lovers. But in regards to Star Wars, these are the same people whose best guess was that Rey is a Kenobi and Snoke was Darth Plagueis, so follow that to its logical conclusion. Mysteries work when they're allowed to persist on their own and surprise people on their own. But the more time you spend hyping up and artificially inflating the mystery, the less effective it's going to be. There's always going to be the point of no return where the end result is, look, you've taken so fucking long and you've dragged your feet so much that we just don't care anymore and we just want it to be over. You really want to test how strong your story is? And I mean, you really want to stress test how strong your story is? Spoil it. Because if your story is good, it being spoiled will not deter people from seeing it. And this is why I despise spoiler culture. Because if spoilers will ruin your story wasn't worth shit to begin with.